I'd been on the road for 15 hours straight, pushing my limits. My dispatcher buddy had called just as I was about to finish up my last delivery, telling me there was one more run to Lafayette if I could manage it. It was pushing it, but the money was too good to pass up. He offered a shortcut I'd never taken before, called Bayou Route 91. He had heard that it was known among truckers for saving a good 50 miles on a route through the Louisiana swamps. I wasn't in the mood for anything fancy, but Buddy swore by it. Apparently it's a little old, he'd said, but it'll get you there fast. The sun had already set by the time I turned onto Route 91, a narrow, cracked road that ran right through the heart of the bayou. I'd driven through back roads before, and I wasn't easily spooked, but there was something oppressive about the swamp tonight. The smell of decaying vegetation was heavy in the air, and the night was so quiet it felt like the entire world was holding its breath. As I rolled deeper into the swamp, my radio crackled and cut out, leaving nothing but static. I fiddled with the dial, but every station was dead. I chalked it up to lousy reception. A thick fog had settled over the road, the kind that clings close to the ground and makes everything look hazy and dreamlike. My headlights barely cut through it, illuminating only the cracked road directly in front of me and the gnarled branches of cypress trees on either side. The trees leaned in toward the road, their limbs stretching like bony fingers, blocking out what little moonlight there was. Then, about a quarter mile up ahead, I noticed a light. A small, steady glow, like an old lantern, swinging back and forth just at the edge of my headlights. I slowed down, squinting into the fog to try to get a better look. It was definitely a lantern, swaying gently, held by a figure standing in the middle of the road. I could just make out their outline. Someone in a long coat, or maybe a rain slicker, with a hood pulled up over their head. Rolling to a stop, I considered my options. Whoever this was, they were blocking the road. I rolled down my window, just a crack. "You okay out here?" I called, but my voice sounded strange, swallowed up by the fog and darkness. The figure didn't answer. They just raised a hand, pointing down the road as if urging me to keep moving. It didn't make sense for someone to be out here so far from any town or house, and the whole situation made my skin crawl. But I wasn't about to turn around, not with so much time already invested in this route. I nodded to myself, rolling the window back up. When I looked up again, the figure was gone. I tried to shake it off as I started driving again, but my hands were tense on the wheel. The road seemed even darker now, and rougher than before. I had to slow down as cracks widened into potholes, some so deep I felt the entire truck shudder as I rolled over them. The yellow paint marking the lanes had faded to almost nothing, and the asphalt looked more like an old country road that hadn't seen a repair crew in decades. The fog only thickened, so dense now that I could barely see 10 feet ahead. Shadows shifted at the edges of my vision, just beyond the reach of my headlights. It was probably just branches or the thick undergrowth, but every so often, I thought I caught movement in the corner of my eye. Then I saw something in the road again. This time, it was an animal, a deer, standing still in my path. I slowed, expecting it to bolt, but it just stood there, staring at me. Its eyes reflected the light, giving it an eerie, almost lifeless look. I inched forward, hoping it would move, but it just kept staring, unmoving, its breath rising in the fog. "Come on, get out of the way," I muttered, tapping the horn lightly. The sound didn't make the deer flinch, it didn't even twitch. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, its eyes fixed on mine in the headlights. A chill ran down my spine. Its body looked wrong, somehow, like it had been injured or its legs were at odd angles. But it was standing. After a few tense seconds, it turned, almost mechanically, and trotted off the road into the trees. I watched it disappear, feeling like I'd just seen something that wasn't meant to be there. I shook my head, muttering to myself about the weirdness of the swamp, and pushed on. But that feeling, the eerie quiet, the lifeless eyes, stuck with me, and I couldn't shake it. The road narrowed even further, with the swamp pressing in on both sides. My headlights barely pierced the darkness, and I had to lean forward, squinting to make out the path. I started to question whether I'd made a mistake taking this route. My GPS had gone out about an hour ago, and I was left relying solely on instinct. Then I saw it, a bridge up ahead. It looked ancient, made of wood and covered in moss, like something out of an old black and white photograph. I stopped, eyeing it warily. Bayou bridges were notorious for being rickety, but there was no way around it. Just as I eased the truck onto the bridge, I caught a glint of light at the other end. The lantern. The same one I'd seen back on the road. My pulse quickened. The figure was back, standing just past the bridge, their lantern casting eerie shadows over the water below. I pushed forward, hoping to just get across and leave them behind. But halfway across, the bridge gave a loud groan. I felt it buckle slightly under the weight of my truck. I froze, my knuckles white on the wheel. The wood creaked, and then, suddenly, the back wheels slid, making the entire truck lurch. My heart pounded as I fought the urge to back up. I looked up, and the figure was gone. I stared at the spot where they'd stood, feeling like I was losing my grip on reality. I edged the truck forward, each foot an agonizing test as the bridge groaned and creaked, the sound echoing through the swamp. Finally, the wheels found solid ground, and I was off the bridge, my whole body shaking. The fog was starting to lift as I moved forward, and after a few more minutes, I spotted lights up ahead, a diner nestled right on the edge of the swamp. The neon sign blinked, flickering on and off. Finding a place out here felt surreal after all that emptiness, but I was too relieved to question it. I pulled into the gravel lot, killed the engine, and stumbled out of the cab, still rattled. I walked inside, and the smell of frying food and stale coffee hit me. It felt like coming back to reality. A waitress looked up from behind the counter, her face turning to one of concern when she saw me. "Goodness, you look like you've been through it," she said, her southern drawl warm and comforting. She poured me a coffee without waiting for me to ask. I took a seat at the counter, wrapping my hands around the mug, trying to shake off the chill that had seeped into my bones. "Yeah, I guess you could say that," I muttered. I was driving down Bayou Route 91. Had to take a detour through the swamp. Thought it would be faster. The waitress paused, looking at me like she didn't quite believe what she was hearing. Her smile faded, replaced with something like pity. "You took Route 91? She exchanged a quick glance with the cook in the back. "Sir, that road's been closed for years. Flooded out by the hurricane 4 or 5 years ago. No one's supposed to drive down there." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean, closed?" I drove the whole way, took it straight from Highway 10. The cook came over, wiping his hands on a rag, his eyes serious. "Buddy, that road's a dead end now. It's been for decades. Washed out and abandoned after too many drivers went missing out there." I stared down at my coffee, mind racing. The lantern, the bridge, the deer, all of it suddenly felt wrong, like a half-remembered dream. I could still smell the swamp water, feel the chill of it seeping into my clothes. The waitress's voice was soft, her words barely a whisper. "Sometimes people go down that way, thinking it'll be faster, but those who make it out." She shook her head, letting the sentence hang in the air. I took a deep, shuddering breath, trying to ground myself in the warmth of the diner. Looking out the window, all I could see was the still, dark swamp beyond. The road was quiet, ordinary, but I knew I'd never look at it the same way. The bayou had let me out, but it felt like it was only because it had let me go. And I wasn't about to tempt it again.